Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're designing a system of government, and you create one specific institution, the Senate, to be the emergency brake.
The cooling saucer, as they used to say.
Exactly. Its whole job is to stop a reckless president before they can, drive the whole republic off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ira Shapiro's book, The Betrayal, makes a really powerful argument that this institution didn't just fail in its mission.
No, he argues it actually hit the accelerator.
Right. And that's what we're going to get into today, the key insights from Shapiro's work on how these constitutional checks can fail and how quickly it can happen.
And it really starts with understanding what the Senate was supposed to be in the first place.
So that's our first big insight, this idea of the Senate's forgotten job.
Right. The framers, they built it to be deliberative, a bit removed from the day-to-day political frenzy, the place for the long-term view.
And historically, it sometimes worked, right? Shapiro points to examples.
Oh, for sure. Watergate is the classic case. You had senators from both parties who were willing to put the institution and the country ahead of their party's president. They showed that backbone.
But Shapiro's core argument is that under the pressure of the Trump presidency, that entire function just dissolved.
It did. He says that for most Senate Republicans, party loyalty and short-term political advantage just completely eclipsed that institutional duty.
So the guardrail basically turned into a rubber stamp.
A rubber stamp or even an enabler. And that's a critical point for understanding how the separation of powers can break down in practice.
And Shapiro puts one person right at the center of that shift, the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, he's central to the whole story. Shapiro paints him as this master strategist, a procedural wizard.
But a wizard whose skill was no longer constrained by the old rules. Is that the idea?
Exactly. The unwritten rules, the customs, the constitutional obligations, they became secondary to winning.
So wait, he's not saying McConnell invented partisanship. He's saying he was willing to weaponize procedure in a way no one had before.
That's it, precisely. And the clearest example of this procedural warfare was over the judiciary.
The Supreme Court nominations.
You have to look at the blocking of Merrick Garland in 2016. That was, just unprecedented, holding a seat open for nearly a year.
Purely for political advantage.
Purely. Then you contrast that with rushing through confirmations under Trump. Shapiro argues that this sent a clear signal to the entire caucus.
That the rules are just tools.
Right, that these are tactical decisions, not constitutional ones. And once you normalize that, it becomes much, much easier to normalize attacks on other institutions.
Which brings us to the ultimate test. The 2 impeachments, and of course the lead up to January 6th.
Yeah, this is where the theory gets tested in the most extreme way possible.
The Senate had the constitutional power to convict, to bar a president from holding office ever again.
And despite everything, the evidence, the outrage, the direct assault on the peaceful transfer of power, they chose not to. Partisan alignment held.
And for Shapiro, what does that outcome really mean for the Constitution?
I mean, it's a devastating conclusion. He argues it effectively paralyzes the Constitution's highest remedy for misconduct.
It sends a message.
It sends a message to any future president that, maybe nothing is truly out of bounds. That as long as you keep your party unified, you might just get away with it.
But he doesn't say this all happened in a vacuum, does he? He connects it to broader structural issues.
No, and that's important. He's very clear that this decline was gradual. He points to things like campaign finance, the polarized media ecosystem.
Things that reward hyperpartisanship.
Exactly. Things that make it politically costly for a senator to defend the institution over the party. But he still says individual choices matter.
That leaders have to be willing to accept short-term political costs to protect the system long-term.
That's the only way back, in his view.
So when you boil it all down, the real takeaway for you is seeing just how fast a constitutional safeguard can corrode.
Yeah. When those unwritten norms are treated as optional, the whole structure becomes incredibly fragile.
The rules on paper mean a lot less than the willingness of people to actually defend them.
Right. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought to mull over.
Which is?
Well, if impeachment and removal are now, for all intents and purposes, politically impossible in a deeply polarized Senate, what's left?
What other mechanisms, be they legal, electoral, or even cultural, can realistically constrain a president who is determined to test the absolute limits of the system?